Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Defending Against Frontier AI, a New Blueprint for Cyber Risk Management. Today's session is brought to you by DataBee and produced by SmartBrief. My name is Mackenzie Puttasi with SmartBrief, a future B2B company, and I'm excited to be your moderator for this session here today. Now, we all know cyber risk evolves by the hour, and frontier AI is accelerating the speed, scale, and sophistication of threats. Yet, most controls and assurance programs still rely on point-in-time assessments and manual review. So today, I'm excited to have a fireside chat set up with you with DataBee executives. We're going to have a candid discussion on how organizations can move beyond checkbox compliance to gain meaningful risk visibility, strengthen decision-making, and build a foundation for continuous monitoring. As you can tell, this is going to be a really valuable conversation. I'm excited to get started, but let's just go over a little bit of housekeeping before we get our speakers up here to make sure you get the most out of this session here today. Now, introductions are always in order, and I've already seen several of you saying a quick hi, hello. We've got a howdy from Texas, hello from Denver, Bethlehem in the house, Montana. So if you're just joining us, just getting settled in, take a look on the right-hand side of your console. You should see a chat interface and a few tabs, chat, docs, and Q&A. So let's quickly go over those. In the chat there, again, this is the perfect place to introduce yourself, share your thoughts, give us your comments and feedback as the conversation advances. We love to see what you're thinking out there, so feel free to pipe in the chat throughout today's session. And again, I've got New Mexico here, Kentucky, San Francisco Bay Area. We've got John from California, New Jersey, and aloha from Steven. Aloha back to you. Awesome. So yeah, feel free to keep those highs, hellos coming in throughout the session. And again, any comments, feedback, ideas, love to hear it, love to see it. Beyond that, if you have any technical issues during today's session, the chat tab is the perfect place to pipe up. Let us know. A quick browser refresh usually does help with any issues with video, slides, audio not loading, not syncing up. But if you're having persistent issues, let us know there. Myself and Deanna, our webinar coordinator, running things here in the background, will be here to help. A couple of the things you can consider to enhance your viewing experience. We do have closed captions here. So at the bottom right, if you hover over your viewport, you'll see that in several languages. You can toggle those on. There's also a light mode if you're viewing from mobile today. So feel free to toggle that on. Kind of pairs down the console. Great if you're on the go, limited bandwidth, anything like that. Alrighty, we do have some time set aside here for Q&A, so we will be fielding as many of your questions as possible today on the webinar. So we invite you to put those in the Q&A tab, not the chat tab, and we'll do our best to answer those as they come up. We also have the docs tab there with a couple interesting follow-ups and extensions of material or information on this topic. So definitely pop in there. You have got the analyst report 451 research, and that's an audit-ready answers grounded in your own data. So you can check that out. There's a link to book a demo as well as a solution brief in there. So all of those, definitely grab them, download them, bookmark them before it's too late. We don't want you to wait and forget. And finally, we have a $250 Amazon gift card up for grabs here today. We're going to draw that at the end of today's session. You do need to be live and present on this session to qualify for that prize, as well as meet the prize terms and conditions, which you can find in the docs tab if you want to review those there. And with that, I think we've covered it all. So let's get this conversation started. Please help me in welcoming to the stage Tyler Alfriend, who's the Field Database Officer at DataBee, as well as Mike Gallegos, who's the Principal Product Manager at DataBee. Gentlemen, welcome, welcome, welcome. Very excited to have you here today. How you doing?
Doing great. Looking forward to it.
Doing great. Happy to be here.
So we're going to dive into the topic, Defending Against Frontier AI, a new blueprint for cyber risk management. But before we dive in, Tyler, Michael, do you mind giving a little bit of an intro around kind of what you're doing on the day-to-day, especially around this topic, and give us a little bit of background on you both?
Yeah, I can kick things off. So I'm Tyler Alfriend. I am with DataBee, which is a security data fabric platform. My background really spans from large enterprises, mostly in the compliance and GRC space, really with a focus in on data and data engineering. Most of my time at DataBee is spent consulting with our customers around data fabric strategies and continuous controls monitoring strategies, but recently transitioned over into our engineering front to help lead a team around how our customers ingest data and get insights back out of it. I'll kick it over to Mike.
Yeah, hi everyone. Mike, nice to see you all here. I'm from the Denver area. I have been in the cybersecurity product space for the last 20 years, everywhere from just cybersecurity consulting to professional services work, and then more recently on the product team. At DataBee, I oversee various use cases, particularly continuous controls monitoring and exposure management use cases. And as we all know, AI is a big part of that. So happy to have this conversation.
Excellent. Well, we are going to keep this conversational today. So again, everyone out in the audience, I do encourage you to be in the chat, in the Q&A. We'll try to take questions on the fly, as well as a dedicated Q&A segment at the end. We've kind of outlined a few key questions to explore this topic with Tyler and Michael. So the first question here I want to pitch to you both is, what barriers do security teams face in the age of AI-powered threats?
I'll take this. Yeah, this is a good question, because how can we enable the cybersecurity teams to be successful? And so a big challenge that I see with the customers we work with is there's this big data aspect, and there's a lot of data everywhere. And when you have AI powered threats, how can you harness this data for AI to, basically use it for AI defense? And so really, I think the really big challenge is data. So whether you're, aggregating everything up to a centralized data fabric, or if you have distributed data sets, it's important that you have agents that can, get access to those via MCP or skills. But it's very important that regardless, the data needs to be structured so that agents can take advantage of it and, do the work that you need it to do to, identify your risks. So yeah, a big part of that is just data quality as well. So you have this different data sets, from databases to applications. You have data data source and data feed data types that come in that have all valuable information for the cybersecurity teams, obviously. So being able to get all that data into a usable state that it's clean and structured for agents to use, I think is a big challenge. It's a huge challenge. Once it's in a nice, structured state, then the agents can have access to it. So if you imagine you have all this data and you have a question, it's hard to get that question manually, like doing your own queries or running your own tools against it. So yeah, it's very, very important to do that. The other big challenge that teams are seeing is that attackers are using what we call frontier AI attacks, and so they have access to these large language models. They're able to go in and probe and discover vulnerabilities on these different environments a lot faster than 5 years ago. And so the time it takes for an attacker to not only find a vulnerability to exploit it could be hours versus how it used to take days or weeks. Because a few years ago, attackers, they would have to do manually these probes, these scans, and then get, find out what was potentially vulnerable, and then write, create scripts manually to, vet and find out if it's actually exploitable. Then to write an exploit, they would have to write an exploit. And for them to find 0 days was very difficult for attackers to do that. But now it's just a prompt away with these AI models, really. And if you have access to these unrestricted models, that's the case that we're seeing, is they can find 0 days, and they're finding many more vulnerabilities very fast. And so yeah, that's a big challenge. And that leads into the next part of remediation. So what we're seeing is this huge spike of vulnerabilities being discovered, and the vulnerability management teams have to keep up with that. And the big challenge is how do those teams scale to be able to harden and remediate their environments accordingly. So yeah. What do you think?
It's not a new issue, right? It's just simply exponentially increasing the speed and the rate at which we need to solve these issues. And now maybe that does lead to some perception or changes in how we even react and respond to some of these security incidents. But I would say overall, it is the same problem. It is organizing where your data points are, figuring out where you need to go to remediate the issues, what you need to patch, what you need to go and get done. Just the time span to identify those and the count that are coming in is going to exponentially increase and already is increasing. So kind of to what everything Mike was saying was like, that is the solution, right? It is getting cleaned up with what you need to be doing. It does change where that cleanup occurs. It is really getting clean with what your data is, what it's showing, how quickly you can navigate it. All that becomes just exponentially more important because, to Mike's point, like you don't have days and weeks and months. You have minutes and hours. So that's really the name of the game there. And so, Mike, I'd be curious, like what do you see on the AI front in terms of kind of organizing and making your AI agents more efficient, and going through their processes? What do you think are like the best practices that you're seeing teams work with, or you yourself, to just organize your AI structure?
Yeah, I think on the defense side, you need to have these agents. You got to have a good harness. You got to be able to figure out how you can leverage models to help you identify your weak spots. There's this whole thing going on right now. It's kind of, it's debatable because you have these commercial frontier models, very capable, very intelligent, and they can find and find these 0-day vulnerabilities. The problem is they are being restricted. They are locking them down with guardrails because there's concerns that if these models get in the wrong hands, they can do a lot of damage, right? So there's this balance of like, do they release these models? Do you hold it? Do you regulate them? Do you release them to a subset of organizations? This is what we're doing right now. But if you go that route, the challenge is that you have these new Chinese models that are just as capable and they have just as much intelligence and they can find these same types of vulnerabilities and exploits. These are open source Chinese models. So like a good example of this just happened a couple of weeks ago, a week or two ago, right, with the Hugging Face incident where you had an OpenAI GPT-5.6 Sol agent. It got up its sandbox and it was doing an infrastructure attack on Hugging Face. Hugging Face was triaging it and trying to find what was going on. And when they were doing their triage and forensics, they were trying to use the commercial frontier models to help them, but the commercial frontier models were guardrailed, and so they weren't able to get the right responses and do the right triage because they were basically guardrailed for them, preventing them from doing so. So they had to fall back on the GLM, I think 5.2 model, to help them like do the right triage so they can get answers. And so that's a big risk that's going on right now, is this whole idea of like, you have these cybersecurity teams need to protect their environments. They need the right models to help them be successful. And so so to answer your question, Tyler, I think that's important, right? Is they need the right models to help them protect themselves, because right now these commercial models are kind of only certain organizations that are allowed to access the models get access to it. They have like this privileged access, and right now, I think I'm curious how that's going to unfold, because with these new Chinese models, I think that might change. And it's a debate of whether or not you open up those commercial models. But if you open up the commercial models so that everyone has access, you get the benefits of a cybersecurity team being able to do what they need to do to help protect their environments, but you also give the attackers that leverage as well to do attacks. So it's very tricky.
Yeah, essentially the solution becomes the gap that you're going to go and create by opening up more and more people to using these high risk models or whatever it is. But yeah, I mean, I see that, we see it, across the companies that I'm working with. There's a lot of, there's a level of conservativeness around what models they unlock for their associates to use. And ultimately those attackers, they don't have those same restrictions. And so it's constant, this kind of game of cat and mouse of, everything's always going to be a response to what's occurring if you don't have the various models that are being used, or to your point, like getting guardrailed against something. So it is a very interesting problem. Yeah.
I think it's fascinating too because, like you said, it's like one release or one update of a very powerful model. If it gets pushed out, it's like instant the effect, and people do have to catch up so quickly. So as you mentioned, Tyler, like the ability and need to respond quickly is really high.
And that, I mean,
Yeah, and
and
just
that's exactly
another piece to your question too, Tyler, is like, okay, so let's say you have, yeah, besides the whole frontier defense piece of it, like the cybersecurity teams, not to me having nice data sets, it's these AI models are just tremendous in helping you, defend your environment because you can just simply ask a question. It can go and it'll make these different tool calls, MCP servers to go to this database, and it'll kind of paint a picture for you of your risk. And so, yes, you can deterministically have tools or queries that organizations would typically run to kind of try to show what they think is risky. But what's great about the AI models is sometimes it bubbles up some little insights that you weren't thinking about. So if you can get the agents access to these data sets and you can have conversations with them and provide them the right context, these models are just getting so intelligent that they're going to start to bubble up little tidbits, little gems of information that you weren't thinking about. And then, could pivot, in how you address, an issue or an attack.
Yeah, and I really think like that's where the industry is going to start evolving is to, how do you make your agents more efficient? What are the steps that you need to be taking to be able to use AI, regardless of what model and dealing with the attacks, so just in general, like as more models become available, what are you doing to make your use of that model more efficient? And making sure that your team is organized and structured properly so that you can equip yourself with using these models and respond quickly and not, just be churning through a bunch of tokens to get there. So
Nice. So I think we've skirted around this a little bit already, but let's dig into some more specifics about how can people out there defend better, defend their critical systems better against AI threats.
Yeah, I can kick this one off. So maybe as a controversial opinion, I think the name of the game is really going to change from defense of attacks to response of attacks. Essentially, these security incidents are going to become more and more inevitable, just for all the reasons we just talked about. And the speed of those incidents are going to increase. The barrier to entry is essentially lower to these attacks now. And so with that, I think it is going to become much more important on how you are responding to incidents as opposed to defending from these incidents from occurring in the first place. I would love to be wrong there. Maybe I am wrong. Feel free to throw it in the chat if I am wrong. But like that's kind of where I see, at least in the short term, like where things are going. And so in terms of how can you better defend, it's how can you better defend against how you are responding to it. And it goes back to the same problems, right? Like making sure you have your data organized, you can kind of understand what is the impact when that incident occurs and your time frame for resolving that and clearing it. That is what you are doing to better equip your security organization. And so it is really just getting deep into everything that we're talking about, organizing everything, making sure you are efficient with your use of AI. And that's kind of the beautiful thing about AI is it's a two-way street, right? We're using AI all over the place. Be using AI to help respond to the increased speed in which the AI attacks are coming. So kind of goes both ways.
Yeah, I think it comes down to giving the cyber teams the tools they need to be successful. And like what we were just talking about before, they need the right models for them to be able to go through and identify the weak spots in their environments that's there. And then I think it really comes down to data quality. So like if you're doing like a cyber investigation, you need to be able to quickly, like what Tyler's talking about is like this closing the gap to remediation. So like if you're gonna start to see more and more vulnerabilities, especially more critical vulnerabilities, the cyber teams need to have what they need to be successful to remediate that as fast as they can. So a big part of that is this whole inventory aspect. So organizations need to have like really good inventory of all their devices and making sure that this CMDB is maintained because agents will use this to determine Being able to correlate a vulnerability scan, like you find something that's vulnerable, being able to correlate that to an actual device, and then who's the owner of that device, and what applications are running on that device. Like it all depends on like CMDB asset information, inventory information. And that's another huge challenge because these organizations, they're huge and they have like thousands of inventories, and being able to maintain and curate and making sure that those are accurate is a big challenge. But yeah, I think to be successful, you need to have a good inventory list, and so that you could triage and have your agents use that context to provide information on what they should focus on. The other big part of this is, like, okay, these vulnerabilities are coming out more so, and a lot of them are even more critical than ever, is you're going to have teams, okay, with, you might be a vulnerability management team or a remediation owner. You might have hundreds of critical vulnerabilities like coming into your queue, right? And so how does that scale? How do you start to remediate that? And I think it comes down to prioritization. So that's how the agents can help, is being able to maybe look at your critical vulnerability list, feeding it your asset inventory list, any other context you think would be valuable, and then have your agents go through and help you kind of put some structure around, like, paint a picture of your current status and what you should focus on. They would like organize it by tier, like, hey, these ones are like more bang for your buck if you remediate these ones versus like doing these ones, because it's all about making sure you're efficient with your time and closing that remediation gap as quickly as possible. So agents are going to help you be able to do that.
Yeah, I mean, it's becomes a game of quick triage, right? And that triage is only possible for everything that Mike just said. It's correlating it back to hopefully your accurate CMDB. So kind of step one is making sure your CMDB is actually accurate, so that you are aware that you're seeing these vulnerabilities. Is it on an internal facing, an external facing? Like, what is actually going on? What is the criticality of this? Are you doing assessments of your critical devices? And then being able to correlate that back to your source system of vulnerabilities. That's where you can start really going through and triaging this stuff properly. Because at the end of the day, that count of vulnerabilities is going to exponentially increase. Vulnerabilities are going to be coming in faster than the team can resolve. They already are. I don't think that's news to anybody, but it's just going to become a worse and worse situation. And so all around how you respond to it, which ones you respond to first, it comes back to risk-based analysis. And then combining that even with how you're performing on maybe other controls. I come from like the continuous controls monitoring background. So we look at everything from not just a vulnerability perspective, but is it equipped with the proper tools? Do you have your CrowdStrike or like a Defender for Endpoint running on that system? If not, maybe that's even riskier of a situation. Like, so kind of combining all that information around, who the user is, who the owner of that device is, bridging that gap to say, this is all the information we know about this asset. Combine that with some risk analysis that you are doing and logging in your CMDB. And now all of a sudden you have a real clear picture of which ones you need to work on first, and which ones you can send your AI agents to go and patch. So, and which ones you need kind of that human in the loop still.
Yeah, I think that's critical. It's like the vulnerability scanners, they'll give you a list of critical vulnerabilities, and they'll give you like a risk score on there. But every environment's different. So there's a lot of business contexts that would raise or lower the criticality of any vulnerabilities. So yeah, like Tyler's saying is like, the agents, if you give it access to the GRC data along with the cyber data, it's going to be able to, put together some recommendations on like, hey, maybe focus on these ones because the owners of these haven't done their phishing training or security training, or maybe these devices are unmanaged because it looks at the CMB data. There's no ownership for these particular devices, but there's vulnerabilities on them, so these are even more riskier. Or maybe it can determine some sort of blast radius. So like, hey, this item is vulnerable, but we also see that it's actually talking to these other endpoints or sources that it could leak into there and go. So what's great is you can start to harness the AI, and you can start to create skills. You can start to create your own little apps to be able to provide for you to get your head around of what you need to focus on.
And I'll add that, like, when we have these conversations with individuals that we're working with, it almost becomes like a game of finger pointing, right? So you'll be working with the vulnerability team, and they say, well, this on asset management is responsible for making sure these data points are entered in the CMDB, or it's on the security awareness team. They're responsible for phishing and training and all that kind of stuff. So the next stage to all of it is the reporting and like having a unified reporting system. So the vulnerability team is operating on something, and that same intelligence is getting passed over to the cross-functional teams within your security organization, and so that if there is a dispute of counts, like you can defend it, and it's kind of putting the onus on the proper teams to make sure that their environment of what they're supposed to be managing is doing what it's supposed to be doing. And I think the interconnecting of dots is just becoming exponentially more and more important to make sure that vulnerability is going to rely on asset management, and asset management is going to rely on X and Y and Z. You just kind of go on and on, and making sure everybody's in lockstep across a large enterprise.
Yeah, Tyler, I think that's a good point. And well, I think a lot of your examples have sort of given us some idea already on this next question. But next one is, how can AI help defend against AI-powered threats? Where does it fall short? So I know this is sort of more specific to the AI itself and what it's able to do and how we can set that up. But I'd also like to sort of extend this question a little bit around how do we organizationally plan for this and make sure it's being rolled out, and one team or one branch is getting the information to the next, and it's a cohesive effort.
Yeah, I know we've touched upon this a little bit already, but yeah, I think it. How do you defend AI threats with AI itself? So, yeah, I think it just comes down to making sure that the cyber teams have what they need to be successful. A lot of times it's just bureaucracy that gets in the way. Sometimes you want to use a certain model, or maybe you want to use a certain like CLI or anything, but the corporate standard might be this, and so there might be some limitations of what tools you could actually use, and yeah, basically it's kind of it limits the teams to do what they want to do. But yeah, I think it comes down to having the right models, and then also like once you have the right models, you just have to figure out the right workflows and the right pipelines to be able to close that gap of discovery to remediation. Is ultimately what it comes down to. So a lot of that's just creating skills that basically go out and help the teams accomplish that. What do you think, Tyler?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. With the number of skills that our team is creating on a day-to-day basis is getting aggressive. To me, that's where I go back to the governance around AI and like what is that going to look like. I think teams need to, this is where the world's evolving. The expectation of the job is now responding to this stuff and building stuff out in what previously took 6 months. Maybe the expectation is now 6 days, because AI is giving you the capability to do that. But it also gives you the ability to kind of go in this very flexible and free-form approach, which is one of the cool things about AI, is that you think of this rigidness that you have to abide by in the processes that teams have built out historically. It is, that structure and those controls and processes were there because, over time things drift and you want stability. AI kind of sort of eliminates the need for that, because you can go in different processes, and everybody can kind of work in their own workflow the way they like to interact with their agent, and ultimately accomplish the same goal. The problem that leads to is that potential drift of like the outcome of what you're producing. And so having good governance around the skills that your team's producing, what are the reference files that it's going back to, everything that you're doing with AI, like everybody needs to be operating on the same speed across the board within your teams. And I think that's kind of one of the many steps of AI governance that teams need to start looking at, and just to make their teams more and more efficient with their use of AI. Which again, like I said earlier, that I think over the next couple of years, if it's not already, like that's going to become the big picture in the engineering world, is how efficient are you with your AI agents, as opposed to are you using AI, yes or no, which is kind of what it's been for the past couple of years.
Yeah, I'm curious if that's going to play out. Yeah, because I'm just like, as more and more teams start to embrace AI, and use AI, then obviously certain teams need to use the latest frontier models. That it's not cheap. That's not cheap, and especially if you start to scale out over a broad team. So, like an example of this is, let's say you need to secure your environment, and let's say you have like just all these repos and all these code bases and all these applications in your environment, right? Ideally, it'd be great if you can get AI to go through and look through all the repos and do all the scans and be able to identify where your risk is, especially if you're looking at like, if you want to identify like 0-day type vulnerability stuff, right? So you would have to use a big model to do that. But these orgs and everyone's creating these AI projects left and right. So there's more and more of these repos popping up, more of these apps. So that it's like, okay, how does that? I'm just curious how this scales out over time with cost for like these different business units. Because if you have like a big model, like trying to comb through and scan and give you results, that can be very expensive to kind of do that. So it might be an approach. I think Microsoft just released something recently around how they released a new model, like a new framework of sorts, a new harness that you basically have a lightweight, you have a lightweight, quick model that can go out and do a lot of triage and investigate and kind of figure out where your holes are, and then where it needs to go a little further, you then throw the bigger model at it, type thing, to reduce costs. Because if you just threw this big model out there trying to scan everything, I'm just not sure how realistic that is from a cost perspective.
That is a good point.
And what are the gates you're putting on that for your organization to make sure that they're not just going an complete overuse or an inefficient use of AI? Because it is very easy just to say, scan our entire repository and identify issues, right? Like it can do that, and it'll give you good results, but it will burn through a lot. So
I've been hearing that more and more in the last few months, where people set out these AI budgets maybe at the beginning of 2026, and they're like, "Great, like go do things, make this happen. We have to keep up and make sure we're advancing." But some people are like, "We've blown through the budget, and it's like July now. So did we get the benefits we said we were going to do? How's this going?" And so I do think it's still a learning curve in terms of what's worth it and what really consumes some of those credits and that energy.
Yeah, and I'd be curious just on the kind of outside of my lens, but from these AI frontier model, like it's their pricing model is not necessarily geared towards making you efficient with your use. And so, Mike, that was the first time I heard about what you mentioned about Microsoft. So, like, I mean, that's good. Like that's where the industry needs to start going, is building out those harnesses to help you become more efficient. And then using AI to essentially make your other AI more efficient is going to be where things start to go.
Okay, we're going to open things up in a few minutes to some audience questions that have been trickling in here. But sort of to put a bow on this conversation before we transition, I know we want to share this blueprint for frontier AI defense. And in terms of we've had some great ideas come up already, but how do people really go at this? And I think, Tyler, you're going to take the lead sharing some of this information.
Yeah, and this is going to repeat what we've been talking about this whole call so far. But really, it's we call it exposure intelligence. And I'll kind of pitch DataBee here a little bit. So, like we mentioned at the beginning, DataBee is a security data fabric. So a lot of these problems that we were talking about around organizing your data, making sure that you have structures in place so that you can go back and identify what are the critical systems and where are the gaps. That is what DataBee is helping our customers solve. And having that exposure intelligence is the first step. Just understanding where your risks are, and that's what exposure intelligence really is all about. And then where those vulnerabilities actually are. And so then you can get to step 2 of actually understanding what actually matters. What do you need to remediate first, especially as we know that the timelines are going to drastically shift here. So being able to remediate what matters most, again, you can only do that once you have the intelligence ready to go. And then all of this, it needs to be built on a solid data foundation. There's a reason we are a security data fabric. It is all around getting your data ready to go, organized in a single location, getting it normalized, and so that AI can be very efficient with its use of going through and understanding the full picture of your environment, and doing what it needs to do off of that.
Tyler, is this model agnostic? Like, as long as your data is all set up and readable and organized, you could say, like, we want to go with, Anthropic, or we want to go OpenAI, or we want to build our own or license another one out, and it could just sort of like live on top of your brain, so to speak.
Yeah, so I mean, ultimately, DataBee. So we land all of your data in your own data storage, right? So it can be like your Snowflake or whatever data lake you want. We have customers using all different sorts of platforms. And then yes, I mean, Snowflake has tools. You can put whatever tool you want on top of your own data storage. We also have a tool called RiskFlow that we launched earlier this year, which is like our AI-powered assistant that it really understands all the nuts and bolts of what DataBee does, and our out-of-the-box insights that we provide to our customers. It provides all that information, provides that additional context, and really cool tools to like kind of deep dive into all of it. Mike, I'm sure you've got lots to add to that since that's your project, though.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of flexibility from customers. They can definitely they own the data, so they could put whatever tools they want to it. But we have this really great tool called RiskFlow that is agentically driven. You could just it's able to do long running tasks and be able to go through and farm and give you some really great quality answers back from your data set.
Excellent. Okay, so gentlemen, I know we've got some questions piling up here, so let's dive into a few of those. Again, if you're out in the audience, feel free to slide these into the Q&A tab now. We'll do our best to answer as many as we can. But Susan was asking to lead us off here. This kind of goes back to what you were saying, Michael. So Susan saying, does the National Vulnerability Database use some of these locked or protected AI agents to determine vulnerabilities? Or is it more important for individual companies to run these agents themselves for specific setups?
I think I can't speak with confidence of how the National Vulnerability Database is compiled, but I imagine it's community driven, and a lot of the cybersecurity products feed it information. And once vulnerabilities are identified, like that database is updated. But I think where I'm going with is like a lot of times with these new frontier models, they're able to find 0 days with vulnerabilities that have never been discovered, right? They might have been there for years, but now these models are able to discover it. And so it would be great if these, your cyber teams could have access to these powerful models and run it against like features or repos or applications, that are really critical to your apps, right? So you would say, hey, for this repo, for this app, like run this model, and basically you give it an adversarial type role where it will go in and try to penetrate it and attack it. And then if it does, then you found something, and then you could, if it's a 0 day, then you could document it, remediate it, and share it, and that type of thing. So that's how I would see how teams would use it.
Tyler, anything you want to add, or is that pretty complete?
Yeah, no, I think you hit the nail on the head there. And I will add, I mean, so one of the approaches DataBee, like to me, this is like an enrichment source of like pulling in that information from these, from like the NIST repository of all the vulnerabilities. Like, so that's one of the approaches that we take is we enrich your data and provide that additional context that they're finding as well when customers onboard vulnerability sources.
Okay, next question I've got in the queue is, so when it comes to AI in cyber risk management, beyond efficiency gains, what are some other KPIs or things you could define as success as we roll this out in our organization?
I personally, like, again, going back to what we were talking about, like success for most organizations in the short term is going to be closer to how are your upstream processes performing. So making sure your CMDB is getting cleaned up, making sure your posture of all the tooling that you're equipping with your assets, making sure that's up to policy and up to the standards that you're creating. Everything works downstream from that. And so those are like the quick wins that companies can go through and really make sure that they're organized with their data so that they can begin responding to this. So that's personally where I view like the key KPIs from in a short-term perspective before even getting into the vulnerability space.
Yeah, I think how I
Oh,
see it is just like the success is reducing that risk posture, and so having AI help you do that is critical. So I'm not, how you would measure that would be different ways, but ultimately you're just basically reducing that risk footprint. So being able to shorten that window of remediation, being able to validate that in fact things are actually getting closed out, remediated. If you could report on that, I think that'd be a good metric to measure.
perfect. And so you mentioned these metrics, the quick wins here. This may be the same, but I have a question here that asked if we could only improve one thing in the next 12 months to defend our organization better against AI-powered threats, what would you two suggest?
I think it comes down to like prioritization. So like the big challenge I see is like all these new vulnerabilities are coming out. Some of them are more critical with these 0 days. The vulnerability management teams are getting overwhelmed and they don't know what to focus on. So it would be like, how do you prioritize that queue? Is like how I would see as the big thing to address, I would imagine for many orgs. So I would say, how do you use AI to help you prioritize? And it's just like, hey, like obviously you have it, you have context from the vuln scan itself, you have business context, you might have some GRC context, like being able to figure out like, have agents help you come up with a way to um, incorporate that context to give you some sort of like risk score of sorts where you can then prioritize. I think that would be ideal. And then then teams could then have clear guidance or understanding what they need to focus on and what's the biggest bang for the buck to reduce their risk posture.
Yeah, data foundation, exposure intelligence, and then 3, organizing your actual vulnerability remediation approach. Even basic things like what is that risk score that you're going to go after? Are you driving off of the CVSS score and that's what you're going to go after the highest, the scores, or are you going to go back and tie it back in with your device, risk levels? So making sure your team is consistent with that so that everybody's operating off of the same, that same metric of this is these are the vulnerabilities we're targeting. This is what the goal is, and making sure everybody's abiding by that goal.
Thank you. Okay, I think this is kind of an interesting one. Question here is what questions should boards and executive teams be asking their security leaders about AI that they may not be asking today?
I mean, I'll take the first stab at it. I think things are evolving so fast. I think even beginning of this year or last year, it was all around, enabling users to be using AI, right? That was the goal. Let's get everybody using AI, equipped with AI. We all had the AI training sessions, and whether your scorecard was ingested with like how much AI are you using on a day-to-day basis, like that was the name of the game. It's like we were talking about earlier, it shifts back to the efficient use of AI now. Like we've kind of opened up the floodgates. And we've seen this over and over that, 10 years ago, I think there was a big push to become data centric and, democratize the data was all the, the buzzword of the decade. And it led to this wild, wild west of everybody creating a bunch of dashboards that were all disagreed with each other. And it was mass chaos. And so, the first 5 years it was spent getting everybody to use the tools. And then the next 5 years was getting everybody to tone down the tools and like get consistent and get, actual controls and processes in place. I think AI is just the same thing, maybe a little bit faster, hopefully a little bit faster. But I think we're towards the tail end of everybody use AI all the time to now let's get really efficient and clean and consistent with our use of AI, because those costs are going to start surging if they are not already.
Michael, anything you'd add?
I think it's a great response. I think it's this efficient use of AI, because I think what you're going to see is you're going to see this sprawl, like everyone start to use it. It's going to be very expensive. And so orgs need to figure out how they budget for that, or how they provide guidance to the users so that they're using more efficient models, and use models with certain models, certain models are better at doing certain tasks and like educating their teams to do that. But again, at the same time, especially the cybersecurity teams. I mean, we need to make sure that they have the tools that they need to be successful. So from a leadership perspective or board perspective, I would just be a question I would ask, like, hey, is there anything that we can do? Are we doing all that we can to reduce our risk posture? Is there any other tools, or do you need any help?
Perfect. And then I have maybe one last question here, and then we'll see how we go. But I had a question around: is there any assumption about cyber risk management organizations may need to rethink over the next few years because of AI? Forward thinking here.
Okay, say it one more time.
Yes, sorry. It was, is there any assumption about cyber risk management that organizations may need to rethink over the next few years because of AI?
I think it just needs to be less reactive. So much has been, it's always responding. It's always looking back at a scope period and telling you how good you were doing X number of months ago. That can't happen anymore. And there's not really a reason for it to happen anymore. Like, we have the tools now to go and be able to respond to things immediately, and then proactively start addressing risk. So if I'm in cyber risk right now, I'm focusing on how can I improve my processes to be able to continuously monitor things, not reactively monitor things. And it's a major shift in even not just how you test it, but what you actually are testing. Like in a GRC space, right? It's less around testing, like getting a sample and testing from there, or even looking at a full population. It's like, hey, let's go upstream. Let's look further up the pipeline, and can we test something here because we now have the tools and the capability and the resources to do that test. That's where I'm hyper focused in on. If I'm in cyber risk today, is just getting prepared for a full continuous monitoring approach as opposed to reactive.
Yeah, I think the how organizations do that will vary over time. Just different tools will be introduced, and so it's important. I think how they are triaging vulnerabilities today, the how and the pipeline of the workflow they use may vary going into the future depending on different tools that are released, I would imagine. But at the end of the day, I think I would imagine for sure it's going to be agentic driven, and along the way figuring out what works for your team to close that discovery to remediation window.
Excellent. Well, gentlemen, thank you for that. Thanks for answering so many questions from both me and the audience today. Before I let you go, is there any final thoughts you want to leave with the audience? Or if they're out there, they're excited, they want to learn maybe more about what you're doing on the day-to-day, DataBee, keeping tabs on you both, where should they go? What should they do?
I'll do a quick pitch. I mean, if these problems sound familiar to you, again, this is what me and Mike work every day on at DataBee. It is trying to solve these problems for our customers, letting our customers shift away from being, it's a lot of data engineering and a lot of data analytics problems, and a lot of AI problems. And if you're in the risk space, being able to go back and focus on risk is a huge win. And so DataBee helps solve a lot of the data problems for you so that you can focus in on doing what you do best, and that's solving risk problems. So contact DataBee if any of this sounds familiar.
Michael, any thoughts, closing remarks?
No, what Tyler said, and no, thanks for having us on, Mackenzie. Thanks for all of you joining. You can find Tyler and I on LinkedIn if you have any questions for us specifically. But yeah, appreciated the session.
Awesome. No, I appreciate your time. Thank you both.
Thank you.
All right. With that, we're going to let you two go, and we're going to wrap things up here, everybody. So again, big thanks to our speakers for making this possible, being so engaging, answering a lot of your questions. If there were a question or two that slips in the last minute, we are going to hand everything off to the DataBee team. So do not fret. We will make sure you get the information that you're looking for. Speaking of information, I do want to remind you all about the Docs tab there. So if you have not yet ventured into the Docs tab, clicked in, tagged any of those, save them. You can book a demo with DataBee. So obviously great if you want to get a sense of how this works, dig under the hood, get a little sense of would this work for you. There's also the solution brief in there, as well as the 451 research analysis report. So again, grab all those, download them, save them, share them with somebody who you think may need them. And with that, we're also going to have a survey pop up really quickly. Same area you've seen, chat docs, Q&A. There'll be a little pop up there. And in there, it's just a pulse check really from us here at Smart Brief. So getting a sense of how you enjoyed the webinar, did it meet your expectations, how's the platform, bells and whistles, all that good stuff, if you don't mind. And then last bit of fun, of course, we have our prize to give away. So for one lucky winner, a $250 Amazon gift card is going out. And our winner today is David McAllister from Texas. So David, congratulations. We are going to reach out by email, let you know exactly how you can get that prize claimed, and then we'll get it over to you very quickly. With that, I think we've covered it all, folks. So I do want to give one final round of thank yous. Again, thank you to DataBee for making today possible. Thank you to Tyler and Michael for being here, sharing their knowledge and expertise with us around this topic. And of course, thank you to all of you for joining, taking time out of your busy schedules to learn something new. Hopefully you're leaving with a lot more than you came in with, and you can take some of these strategies and ideas into your organizations to make sure you're staying on top of the game here as this quick evolution around AI and data security evolves. So again, thank you. If you want to check out any other webinars, events.smartbrief.com is the place. You also have that QR code up on the screen you can scan. But until our next webinar again together, everyone, take good care and have a great rest of your days.